and welcome to another tutorial from CamiPaige Boutique. I'm Brooke Tannehill, and today I'm going to show you how I made this Opal Cherry Blossom custom tumbler. I've seen a lot of different opal tumblers out there, but I wanted to create something a little different that incorporated florals and leopard print. As always, all of the products I use will be listed in the description below, and you may even find a coupon code or two that saves you some coin. Also, come join our exclusive Facebook group where you can take advantage of upcoming freebies and giveaways that you aren't going to want to miss. So without further hesitation, let's go ahead and get started. I primed and painted this cup on Alive in the CamiPaige Boutique Facebook group. We have a lot of fun, so we would love to have you come on over. But this is a 20-ounce straight skinny from Parish Tumblers, and what I like to do is when I prep my tumblers, and actually before I start the process, is I just take a craft knife, an X-Acto knife, remove the sticker on the bottom, sand it with like an 80 or 60 grit sanding block, and just rough up the surface. What this does is it allows for the paints that we'll be using to really adhere to the cup and not have any lifting. So once I get that nice and sanded, I just spray it with 91% alcohol, and then I wipe it down with like I don't want to say lint free because obviously all paper towels are lint free, but like a very less paper towel, and then I come in to laying my paints down on the cup. So I am using a very cheap makeup brush from the dollar store. They also have them on Amazon. They're just a little more expensive, but it saves you a trip, and with gas so high, it levels out. But the first color I am laying down is called Hot Pink Lipstick, and this is from Miss Lillian's No Wax Chalk Paint. I linked it below. And then I came in with Robin's Egg Blue, which is this beautiful light blue color, and I am just kind of laying down the groundwork for my different paints that I'll be using. So starting with the darkest pink, because I wanted to do the darkest color first, then going in with the Robin's Egg, and then I come in with Rosebud, which is the lightest pink, and I am just kind of doing random paint strokes and just blending them together, but really keeping the colors independent of each other because we will be layering glitter and then also the cellophane onto this cup to give it a lot more dimension. One thing I like to call out is when you are using a chalk paint like this Miss Lillian's No Wax Chalk Paint, I like to keep my brushes just like damp, just so it's a little wet. And then you can see I'm also showing you how I'm blending the colors together and laying down all three. But just by keeping your brush just a little wet, it helps the colors to go on nicely and you get like a really smooth finish. So Miss Lillian's No Wax Chalk Paint actually has like self-leveling properties to it, as well as it dries within 10 minutes. So it's absolutely wonderful. So I am just laying on the paint colors, going over it with my heat gun just to speed up the process. And then I'll come in and kind of lay down a second layer of the paint to make sure that I'm really happy with the placement and that I have enough of each color around the surface of the cup. Once I have all of the paint laid down and it's dry, I grabbed this cellophane. And now this is not a typical cellophane. It's actually a pink cellophane, and it had a lot of really great opal colors. So what I'm doing is, and also, by the way, I did not know this, but cellophane is like folded on top of itself. So like when you order the roll, I was so confused at first, but make sure to unfold it. But I just cut off some like random like jagged pieces of it and crumbled them up to really give them that like opal look. So you can see I crumbled them up, and then I'm just going to lay them around the cup, get kind of my roadmap going again, and then you want to lay down a healthy like bit of Mod Podge underneath the cellophane so that it doesn't lift. So the last thing you want is to just like put the cellophane down and then have it come off of your cup like when you go into your coats of epoxy. So make sure that it's really nice and glued down and it's not going anywhere, and just place the cellophane, the crinkled cellophane, over your Mod Podge spots, and you can see how it just like goes on to the cup. And one thing I learned is that even if it is like crumbled or folded, you do want to try and smooth it out on the surface of the cup. Not smooth to the point where it's not crinkled anymore, but you don't want any like lumpy, bumpy folded pieces because it will take more coats of epoxy to cover, and that's not something that you want. So try and lay them down still with like the crinkled essence, I guess, to it, but not lumpy, bumpy to where you have a bunch of like jagged pieces sticking up. Make sure that they're nice and glued down. And then once I was happy with like the placement around the cup, and I will say I did not go hog wild with the cellophane. I wanted to add enough to where you could tell it was opal, but also we will be coming in with a bunch of opal glitters and different cuts, and I wanted those to shine through as well. So add enough, whatever tickles your fancy, and then just make sure that it's nice and glued down and it's not going anywhere before you move into the next steps. One thing I do want to call out is I tried a couple of different methods for applying the Mod Podge to the cup. I found that the best way to get enough of the glue onto the cup without having gloppiness or having to kind of go over it several times is just to use a paintbrush. Mod Podge is water-based, so you can simply wash it out with soap and water after you're done, but this was really the technique that worked the best for getting the cellophane onto the cup. Now, on the bottom, it gets a little wonky, so one thing I do recommend is cutting slits into the sides of the cellophane where it kind of folds over the cup, and that would prevent any of the weird folding that you see on the bottom, because it did present some issues as I moved on to the next steps, because I did need more coats of epoxy to cover that fold. So definitely just make slits into the side to where you have nice smooth folds around that edge of the cup, and you should be absolutely golden. So typically when I apply Mod Podge, I let it dry for about 4 hours, but I did let this sit overnight just because the cellophane was over the surface of the glue and it wasn't getting as much air exposure. So I did let it dry for about 10 to 12 hours before moving on to the next steps, and then it was good to go. For the glitter application, I chose to do the epoxy method. So what I did is I just slightly warmed the cup so that I would get a nice even surface for applying my glitter. And I just used this maybe I want to say 15-20 seconds just to kind of warm the surface. And I was doing several cups at this time, so you're going to need less than a milliliter of epoxy to cover the entire surface, but I just used Artistry's 2-to-1 fast set for this process just because I wanted to make sure that I have plenty of work time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time applying the epoxy to the cup, because I'm going to make sure to avoid a lot of those cellophane opal spaces. So I'm going to just use a gloved finger and apply the epoxy, taking my time, but also making sure that I'm getting enough of the glitter in between the cellophane pieces to kind of make it look natural, if that makes sense. So the first color I'm coming in with is Wonder from Boujie Glitter Boutique, and this is a beautiful chunky opal mix that was just perfect for this cup. So I'm just applying it every so often, not doing it all over the cup, because I want to get a bunch of different cuts and also opal hues to this tumbler. So the second glitter that I grabbed here is actually called Unicorns and Rainbows, and the first one has more of, I want to say a yellow shift to it, and Unicorns and Rainbows definitely has more of that blue shift. So I thought it was a great combination, and again, I'm just laying this down every so often. And then I'm coming in with Boujie Bling, and this is by far my favorite straight opal I've ever used. It's just got a perfect shift to it, and it's got a great cut. So I'm coming in and filling in some of those spots. And then finally, I will come in with Angel Dust, which is just a compliment to Boujie Bling, but again, it just shifts a little bit different, and just finish off the entire placement of this cup. I let that dry for about 4 hours, and then I sealed it twice with Rust-Oleum clear glass spray paint, and then it was time to move into epoxy. For my coats of epoxy over the glitter, I am using Artistry's 1-to-1 fast set. Not just because it dries in literally between an hour to 2 hours, but also I like the fact that it's a thick viscosity. So with covering the chunky opal mixes of glitter and then also the cellophane, because it is the thicker viscosity, I get a nice thick coat of epoxy to cover all of the beautiful work that we just laid down. So it cuts down not only the time of drying, but also how many coats of epoxy I need to cover all the design elements that we added to the cup. So I'm just applying, I think the first coat I started with was 25 milliliters of epoxy, and it was almost perfect, but I did go in with a second coat, and the second coat of epoxy, I did use Artistry's 2-to-1 fast set, just because I wasn't super in a hurry to make this cup, but also Like the 2-to-1 fast set from Artistry just is a thin coat, and I think it covers great. But I let that dry for about probably overnight, and then it was time for sanding that you see right here. If you're an OG to my tutorials, you know that I love my orbital sander. So that is what I'm using right here with 120 grit sandpaper. And what I'm doing is I am just simply rocking my cup back and forth and sanding my entire cup to make sure that I'm getting down and like knocking down all of the lumps and bumps or rough spots that could have come through the epoxy from like the glitter or the cellophane that I used. The reason why I like my orbital is because it has a nice rigid surface, so it doesn't dig out any of like the lower spots that my epoxy might have left, but it also knocks down the higher parts or like the mountains nice and evenly, so I don't have any more unevenness as I go into my next coats of epoxy. And I know I just said that over and over again and it doesn't make sense, but I promise that this is a game changer for the overall quality of your tumblers, and it really speeds up the process of getting that nice smooth finish on your cups. Here I'm using my Dremel 3000 and my 120 grit flap wheel to just expose the slightest bit of stainless steel at the rim of my cup. What this does is it allows for the final coats of epoxy to really adhere well to the cup and prevent any liquids from getting in behind the epoxy and causing it to peel off. So this is a really nice longevity saver, I guess you could say, for your tumblers. And then I just grab my 80 grit sanding block and knock down that ridge so that it's nice and smooth in case anybody chooses to drink directly from your cup and there's not that hard ridge that can cause some uncomfort with your tumblers. After all that sanding was done, I did move into another coat of epoxy. I used Artistry's 2-to-1 fast set for just a nice smooth coat. Let that dry for about 12 hours, even though it didn't need to. It literally dries to the touch at about 4. And then here I am using my alcohol inks to start to create more of that opal effect with this tumbler. The first color I grabbed is Magenta by Breveries, and I will list all of the colors below so that you can check them out. But what I like to do is I just put a little bit of alcohol ink onto a coffee filter and kind of dab out the shape that I want for the alcohol ink. Now, granted, you'll see that they're really intense at first, but what I do is I grab a second coffee filter, spray it down with 91% alcohol, and kind of fade it into the overall look of the cup. So you can see, like at first it was super harsh, and then I come in with the alcohol and it really toned down the color and gave it more of that organic feel. And then second, I came in with a lighter pink, and I will list the name of it below because I cannot remember off the top of my head. And I just dabbed it on again to kind of complement where I'd laid down that first magenta color. So kind of alternating between. So here again, I went back to that magenta just because it was having such an impact. It was such a beautiful color. And then just coming back over it with the alcohol and just getting that nice placement. Then I came in with Aquamarine from Tim Holtz, and you could see that that was just a really beautiful blue that played well with the other paint that we had laid down. And I'm just kind of adding it here and there, kind of staying to where that blue paint had already been laid down. And then finally coming in again with that alcohol, like the alcohol, 91% alcohol over the coffee filter, and just kind of blending everything together, but still keeping it independent because I didn't want to just have like a massive amount of purple all over the cup. And then I let that dry. After the alcohol ink sat for about, I would say 12 hours, like overnight, I grabbed my adhesive from Artistic Painting Studio, and we're just going to apply foil to the cup. So this adhesive is by far the best adhesive I have seen to apply foils to cups. And all I'm doing is I'm just taking a thin paintbrush and kind of painting on tree branches. So this is going to be the branches in which we lay down our cherry blossoms. But I am just kind of painting on just some random tree branches in different patterns around the cup. Then I come in with my heat gun and I just dry the adhesive. Now, word of advice, do not overly dry it, because if you dry the adhesive too much, then the foil will not adhere to it. But just make it to where the adhesive starts to lose its opaqueness to where you can't see the white on the cup, and then that's when you know it's time to apply your foil. So I'm just taking this beautiful kind of rose gold color foil, and I will list it below. This is also from Artistic Painting Studio, and I am just laying it over the adhesive that I laid down, and you can see just how beautiful that covered, or beautifully that covered covered and then how it just shined on that cup. Then I turned the cup over and I started to do the same thing because I wanted to have two separate kind of organic looking branches. And I'm sorry, I use that word all the time, but just kind of some whimsical looking, wow, I'm on a roll tonight, whimsical looking branches around the cup, but I'm not using any kind of rhyme or reason, just randomly painting the branches around the surface of the cup and getting that nice and kind of laid out before I apply the heat gun for the second branch. Now, there is no right or wrong for laying out your tree branches. And the thing that's really nice about foils is, let's say you get your adhesive laid down and you're like, wow, I missed a branch, I need to add some onto it. You can simply come in with more adhesive after you've laid the foils down and still get amazing seamless branches. Nobody's gonna know the difference. So play around with it until you get the branch of your dreams for your cherry blossom tree. So I'm following the exact same process that I did on the other side, but because I had already used this foil, some of the areas had already been taken off on the other branch that we had added to the cup. No big deal. All you want to do is just move the piece of foil around and just get the coverage that you want. If there are spots where the adhesive maybe dried too quickly or you weren't happy with the way that the adhesive laid down, again, just lay down more adhesive and then put the foil over it until you get the coverage that you want. I went for more of a slick look with my foil. If you wanted it to look more kind of grungy or kind of crackly, like we did with the cellophane, you could easily crumble up the foil before applying it. I just really liked the beautiful, shiny, metallic foil branches that we had added. Once I was happy with the foil placement, I did move immediately into sealing the alcohol inks and the foils. I first did a coat of the Camar varnish from Krylon. And the reason why I do that first is because it is amazing at sealing in alcohol inks, and you don't get the fading of the alcohol inks like you do if you were just to move into an immediate coat of epoxy. So after that varnish was completely dry, I did move into a coat of Clear Loss Rust-Oleum spray paint, just because I've had numerous issues with the Camar varnish repelling epoxy, and I didn't want it for this stage of the cup. After the cup was good and sealed, it was time for a coat of epoxy, and then we are adding our leopard spots. So what I did is I just cut the centers of the leopard print out using the platinum textured vinyl from Cricut, and I am just applying the centers of the leopard print around kind of in a swirl pattern on the tumbler. There's, again, no right or wrong to the placement of the leopard. I just liked it kind of going in a swirl around the cup, and then I just added some here and there to play off of the cherry blossom branches that we had added with the foils. Once I was happy with the placement, I just grabbed my Mod Podge, or the Devil's Glue, and just a kind of a thinner paintbrush, and I just started to dab on the Mod Podge in the pattern of the leopard print that I wanted. The first color I am using is a teal. It's called Bora Bora, and this is a metallic glitter from Boujie Glitter Boutique, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it really played well with the different colors that we had already added onto the cup. But what I tried to do is I tried to keep the teal glitter placements around in the pink sections of the cup, and then I came in with bubblegum, which is more of an opaque kind of neon pink in the blue sections of the cup. So that's kind of how I did it. Definitely choose what works best for you. But I just moved around, keeping, again, like the sections differently. So if the background color was pink, I used Bora Bora. If the background section was blue, I used bubblegum, and just moved around the cup until I was happy with the leopard print placement. And I let that dry for, I want to say, probably 2 or 3 hours. And then I made sure to seal the glitter really well. Also, total side note, but one thing that I think is hugely important when you're applying glitters in this stage of the cup is make sure to take your time and remove any stray glitter that you do not want to be seen in your final coats of epoxy. So here I'm just taking a probably 2-inch chip brush. They're just cheap paint brushes. You can get them anywhere, and just knocking off all the stray glitter. And then I let all of that glitter dry for about 2 or 3 hours, and then it was time to apply our cherry blossoms. So this SVG for the cherry blossoms will be available for free in the CamiPaige boutique group, so please come join and you can download this SVG. But I just cut this on Oracal 651, just white vinyl, and I did 2 different sizes. So the bigger cherry blossom that you see there was cut at 0.75 inches wide, and then the littler cherry blossoms were cut at 1/2 inch or 0.5 inches wide. And I just kind of went through and I applied the cherry blossoms just every which way around the surface of the branches that we had added to the cup. I am using transfer tape to apply the cherry blossoms. You can honestly skip the transfer tape if you don't want to use it, and simply apply the vinyl using like an X-Acto knife or craft knife. You do not have to use the transfer tape. I just felt more comfortable in the application with using it, but whatever floats your boat. And who knew that the top of my head would make a cameo in this tutorial? But all I did is I just went around and add the cherry blossoms. Again, I know I've said that several times. There is no right or wrong to the placement. And then once I was done with the one side of the branch, I did move over to the other side. I needed about 20 cherry blossoms in total when I cut them out. At first, I only cut like 10 and it wasn't enough to cover the entire surface of the cup, but add as many or as few as you like. I just liked this added detail because I feel like it pulled the entire aesthetic together, and I just loved the way this turned out. I sealed the glitter and moved into 2 final coats of epoxy, and look how beautiful this cup came out. I absolutely love how all the colors kind of melded together to create this just beautiful opal inspired tumbler, and I just think it turned out 10 times better than I could have ever imagined. If you have any questions about any of the steps or information shared in this tutorial, please feel free to reach out and I will be more than happy to help. As always, thank you for watching. It really means a lot to me. If you like this tutorial, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can see future videos. You can also ring the bell so you're notified of all future cup making goodies. Thank you again. I love you guys. Bye.